The first thing I'm going to do for you is divert for a few moments tonight on what evil influences really are in this world, what God's advice is in all of this brevity here, and secondly, what the core of God's emotion is when he tells Judah to turn away from the northern kingdom of Israel. Now, the first thing I must remind you, ladies and gentlemen, is this, that you and I are constantly under the effect of some kind of influence. A psychiatrist once said to me in a plane that he did not send his clients to Christian ministers or counselors or evangelists because they were ethically biased. I said, that's interesting, sir. Aren't you? Just because my ethic comes from A as a source and his ethics come from B as a source, what makes A less desirable as a source in and of itself? The fact of the matter is, nobody lives under a total situation of the absence of influences. We are constantly under influences of one kind or the other. The first is the intellectual influence. One of the thinkers who has done a lot of thinking in this area is a Russian novelist who is known more by his books than his hard-to-pronounce name, Fyodor Dostoevsky, who's written many well-known books. Prime amongst them is Brothers Karamazov, and also well known is Crime and Punishment. Dostoevsky is struggling in his own mind and has been doing so for years on the area of influences in the lives of people. And in one of his books, Crime and Punishment, he has as his featured character a girl by the name of Sonia, whom he portrays brilliantly as a girl who's a kind of a schizophrenic in terms of her religious faith, not emotionally disturbed, but struggling with her conscience, for she's a deeply religious girl, wants to live a godly life, but on the other hand, her family is very poor, and she has sold herself to a life of prostitution in order to earn money to support the family. Many a time she lies down in total despair, saying, I know I'm hurting the God whom I believe in. The man whom she's involved with in a romance, Raskolnikov, is exactly the opposite. He is godless, he is an atheist, he makes his own laws, he breaks his own laws, he's a hoodlum, right down to the very core of his thought patterns. One day she says to him while she's weeping, I hope and pray to God that he will protect my younger sister from such an ugly sin, the sin of prostitution. Raskolnikov starts to grin and he says to her, Sonia, did you not hope and pray to God that he would protect you from that sin? Silence. Sonia, did you not hope and pray to God that he would protect your friends from that sin? Those very friends who are on the street selling their bodies right now? Silence. Sonia, the God who closed his ears to the prayer you were praying for yourself and who couldn't care anything about listening to your prayer about your friends or on the streets now, what suddenly makes you feel that this God is all of a sudden going to become involved in your prayer for your younger sister? The truth of the matter is, Sonia, there is no God and there is no sin. Sonia runs out clasping her ears in effect and screaming, asking him to stop, and while he stands there laughing derisively, laughing at what? Laughing at the fact that he has effectively knocked out the foundations of truth on which that simple girl is trying to build her life. And ladies and gentlemen, there are thousands of such people scattered all over the world. The university is a prime example of this kind of a setting. As the great British philosopher, writer Malcolm Muggeridge says, we have now educated ourselves into imbecility. And having educated ourselves into imbecility, some of these professors now stand behind podiums there, knocking off effectively the faith from thousands of young people's lives year after year after year. I have stood in dialogue and in debate with some of them and seen the total godlessness and the total alienation that they are creating in the minds of young people against God. Many years ago, I picked up the book written by Bertrand Russell, Why I Am Not a Christian. I hesitate to even mention it to you, but I remember as a brand new Christian thumbing through that, and as I was looking through it and reading some of these ideas that Russell had against God, how effectively he very nearly was eroding the foundation on which I was standing. He held me in spellbound attention as I turned from page after page after page. And finally, I had to bow my head in prayer and said, God, would you please help me to hang on to the last shreds that I've finally clung to in order to dispense with the arguments that are contained therein. It was because of the effect that book began to have on my life that I ultimately decided I had to strengthen my own faith before I stood up behind any pulpit and told people to believe what I myself was claiming to believe. I'm just reminding you, young people, that you are going to be a victim of an onslaught intellectually. That barrage is going to pound into your thinking year after year after year in a university campus where you're going to have the idea as if you're standing alone as a Christian and the masses are moving in a different mainstream and you become the fool for believing in God. They become the, quote, intellectuals for their rejection of God. The Bible warns you of the intellectual influence. I just leave that illustration with you to somehow harbor in your mind for a little while and see what God says to do with it.